Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a really important topic, stress in school-age kids. From those first tentative steps into first grade, all the way to the cusp of adulthood in 12th grade.
Yeah, that whole K-12 journey.
Exactly. We've gotten a comprehensive look at this from a 1993 review in Educational Psychology Review, and it's going to be our roadmap for understanding this often underestimated issue.
Right. And for you listening, our goal in this deep dive is to really unpack what stress looks like for young people, especially within the school environment.
Yeah, we want to go beyond the usual assumptions and give you some solid insights into what's really going on.
Definitely.
Okay, let's unpack this. This article lays out a core way to think about stress, and it boils down to a balance, or lack thereof, between what a student perceives as being asked of them
Right. The demands.
and what they feel they have in their toolkit to handle it, the resources. And this feeling, this personal take on the situation is absolutely key.
That's right. The article highlights two critical steps in this personal take, or appraisal, as they call it. First is primary appraisal. How big a deal does the student think this challenge is? Is it a minor hurdle, or does it feel like a huge mountain?
Okay,
Hmm.
severity and importance.
Second is secondary appraisal. Do they believe they have what it takes to deal with it? Things like time, skills, support from friends or family. All of that comes into play here.
So if a student looks at a situation and thinks, yeah, I've got this, then it's not really a stressor, is it?
Nope. It might even be a good kind of challenge, something that helps them grow. They feel in control, capable.
But here's where it gets really interesting. When those demands feel like they outweigh what the student has to offer,
The imbalance.
that's when the stress alarm bells start ringing. And we see all sorts of effects, both big and small, which we'll definitely get into.
And it's not just about feeling overwhelmed by too much. The article also touches on the flip side, the stress that comes from being, well, bored.
Oh,
Yeah, from feeling like you're not being challenged enough. That's another kind of imbalance where your resources feel underutilized.
that's a great point. And something the article really emphasizes is how important a student's sense of control is.
Hugely important.
When they feel like they have some say in what's happening, it can really cushion the blow of a stressful situation. But think about it, kids and teenagers often have a lot less control over their lives than adults do, right?
For sure. Schedules, rules, decisions made for them.
And they're still building up their coping skills. Their resources aren't fully developed yet. This can make them particularly vulnerable.
And what's fascinating here for you to consider is that it's the student's own viewpoint that matters most.
Right, not what we as adults think should be stressful.
Exactly. It's how the young person themselves sees the situation and their ability to manage it. So with that framework in mind, let's dive into the specific things that actually cause stress for students.
Okay, sources of stress. The article breaks these down in some really helpful ways. Elkind, back in '86, gave us a useful set of categories. Things that are foreseeable and avoidable, like getting involved in risky behavior, maybe drug use or breaking the law. And these tend to be linked to feelings of anxiety.
Okay, makes sense. You're worried about getting caught.
Right. Then there are the unforeseeable and unavoidable events, like getting sick, or, sadly, the loss of someone close. These are often connected to sadness or depression.
Yeah, the grief and helplessness.
And finally, the foreseeable but unavoidable ones, think tests, dental appointments, stuff like that. Those can often lead to feelings of anger or frustration.
Interesting, like I have to do this and I don't want to.
Exactly. So you can see how different types of stressors might trigger different emotional responses.
Yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture for you, Elkin's categories help us understand that the emotional experience of stress isn't one size fits all. Different kinds of challenges can lead to very different feelings.
Then Farrell and his team in '88 looked at high school students who were at risk of dropping out.
Okay, a specific group.
Right. And their categories of stress were quite different. They focused on things like sexual pressures, family issues, the influence of their peer group, or even street culture, and worries about future jobs.
Wow, so much broader than just academics for that group.
It really tells us that for some students, the pressures extend far beyond just homework and grades.
And a really significant finding from Farrell's work was just how much negative peer pressure these students were facing, pressure to do drugs, skip classes, alongside, interestingly, a deep sense of boredom with school itself.
Boredom again?
Yeah, it really highlights that for some young people, the biggest stressors might be happening outside the classroom, in their social lives and communities.
This raises an important question for you. How do these external pressures then interact with the things that might be causing stress at home?
Good point. And the article goes into quite a bit of detail about family stressors. For example, a study by Gamble and McHale in '89 found that kids who had younger siblings with disabilities sometimes struggled more than those without.
Oh, really?
Yeah, suggesting the added responsibility and, the change in family dynamics can be a real source of stress.
And it's not just major life changes like that. Patterson and McCoven in '83 found a connection between a buildup of even everyday family disruptions.
Like arguments, schedule changes.
Yeah, things like that. And a decline in lung health for children with cystic fibrosis.
Wow. That shows just how physically impactful family stress can be.
Definitely. And even something that might seem minor, like hassles with parents and siblings, was reported as a top stressor by high school freshmen in Thomas and Grower's '86 research. And that was across different types of schools.
So for you listening, it's a reminder that even regular family friction can take a toll. It adds up.
What's fascinating here for you to note is the consistency of some of these stressors across different age groups. Price and colleagues in '85 found that for junior high students, the top 3 stressors were arguments with parents,
Okay, that tracks.
not having enough money, and being treated like a child.
Ah, the autonomy piece. Yeah. These really get at fundamental needs for autonomy, resources, and positive relationships within the family.
The article also shines a light on the impact of more serious family challenges. Roos and his team in '89 pointed out that a large number, I think it was around 7 million of children in the U.S., were living with at least one parent struggling with alcoholism.
Wow, that's a huge number. And you can just imagine the instability and stress that situation would create for a child.
Absolutely. And then we have the impact of parental separation and divorce.
Right. The numbers there are significant. Around 1 million children experience their parents separating each year, and many, many more are living with divorced parents.
So common.
But interestingly, a study by Williams and Compass in '88 didn't find big differences in emotional problems between teenagers from single mother households and those from first-time married parents.
That's surprising.
It is. However, the article does highlight that adolescents with step-parents often face unique stressors. Things related to discipline, maybe feeling the absence of a biological parent, feeling misunderstood, or even divided loyalties. Strother and Jacobs pointed that out in '84.
So for you, it's a reminder that changes in family structure, even if common, can bring their own set of challenges. It's not necessarily better or worse, just different stressors.
Exactly. And the research on family finances and stress is a bit nuanced, too.
How so?
Well, Bird and Kemmerate's '90 study didn't find a direct link between parental employment status and reported stress in kids.
Okay.
But Clark Lempers and colleagues in the same year did find a connection between financial strain within the family and adolescent depression.
Ah, so it's maybe less about if parents work and more about the feeling of financial insecurity.
It seems that way. Perhaps the worry, the tension around money, that's the bigger factor.
If we connect this to the bigger picture for you, what becomes really clear is that the dynamics within a family in all its different forms have a really significant impact on a young person's stress levels.
Makes sense. So much of their world revolves around family.
Okay, now let's turn our attention to the school environment itself, which the article also identifies as a major source of pressure.
Great. The place they spend so much of their time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We might immediately think of things like, crowded classrooms and not enough teachers, the obvious stuff.
Sure.
But the article delves into more specific school-related stressors. Dickey and Henderson's '89 study with younger students, K through 3rd grade, revealed that things like schoolwork itself, just the learning part, navigating peer relationships, experiencing personal injury or loss, maybe falling on the playground or a pet dying, and even just the loss of comfort, space, or free time were their biggest worries.
Wow. Loss of free time for a kindergartner. It's striking how early these pressures can start.
It really is.
Yeah.
What's fascinating here for you to consider is how even at a very young age, both the academic demands and the social complexities of school are major factors.
Yeah. Phillips 78 research with 4th and 5th graders built on this. They categorized school stressors into 2 main areas. Academic the pressure to learn, master stuff and be evaluated.
Test grades.
Exactly. And a social dealing with friends, teachers, classroom activities, fitting in.
Yeah.
Their analysis also identified specific school-related anxieties like fear of being rejected by peers, worry about exams, feeling overwhelmed by high expectations, maybe from parents or teachers or even themselves, and even the physical sensations that come with feeling stressed, like butterflies in your stomach.
Right, the body's reaction. Seaman, also in 78, reinforced the idea that unmet expectations from parents, teachers, along with feelings of frustration dealing with change and the pressure of competition, are significant sources of school stress.
And the list goes on. The article mentions how having low self-confidence, which unfortunately can be both a cause and a result of struggling academically.
Vicious cycle there.
Totally. Being picked last for teams, not knowing the answers in class, being in a lower reading group, all these things can contribute to a student's stress.
Yeah, those seemingly small daily experiences can really add up, can't they?
They really can. This raises an important question for you. How do these seemingly minor everyday hassles accumulate and impact a student's overall well-being?
Right. And the article highlights many other contributing factors. Overcrowded classrooms, the presence of violence in some
A
schools,
huge one, unfortunately.
navigating peer pressure, including dealing with disruptive classmates, having difficulties with teachers, feeling that the curriculum is boring or irrelevant.
The boredom factor again.
Yeah. Enduring long days for students, maybe in daycare settings before or after school, the intense competition for grades and social status, and even performance anxiety like stage fright in presentations or performances.
It's a wide range of pressures, really covers the whole school experience.
And it's interesting to think about the stress of hothousing children, as Siegel described it in 87.
Right, pushing them academically too hard, too soon.
Exactly. Pushing them beyond what's developmentally appropriate. A study by Burtz and colleagues in 90 actually found more signs of stress in kindergartners who were in these hot-housed environments compared to those in more play-based programs.
So there's a real sweet spot, isn't there? Challenging young minds without tipping the scale into overwhelming stress.
Seems like it. But, if we connect this to the bigger picture for you, it's not all negative within the school environment.
It's important to remember.
Yeah. The article mentions Rutter's research, cited by Honig in 86, that found for some students, particularly girls, who had experienced institutional care, their school experiences actually acted as a buffer.
A protective factor.
Exactly. A buffer against stress from other parts of their lives. This really underscores the potential for schools to be supportive and protective environments, not just sources of stress.
That's a hopeful note.
Definitely. Now, the article also delves into some fascinating differences in how boys and girls and students in different geographical locations experience stress.
Okay, gender and location.
Thomas and Gross' 86 findings suggest that girls are more likely to report feeling stressed by their relationships, friends, maybe romantic interests, and concerns about their appearance.
Social pressures.
While boys tend to be more stressed by the fear of failing academically and worries about their future careers, vocational stuff.
Interesting divergence there. And studies by Bash and Kirsch in 86, along with Price and colleagues in 85, found that girls generally tend to rate events as more stressful overall.
More sensitive to it, maybe?
Possibly. And they also reported having experienced a greater number of stressful life events.
Okay.
And get this, Cohen and his co-authors in 87 even found that positive events seemed to help girls cope with stress. But this wasn't the case for boys.
Really? Positive things didn't buffer stress for boys.
Apparently not in that study, which is a really intriguing difference compared to what we often see in adult studies about the impact of positive life events, those uplifts.
Yeah, that's counterintuitive. It almost seems like girls might be more, aware of and sensitive to potential stressors in their environment and perhaps give them more weight.
That's one interpretation. Pryor Brown and her colleagues' 86 studies supported this, finding that girls rated stressful life events as more upsetting than boys did, even when they had experienced a similar number of these events.
So, same event, different impact rating.
Potentially, yeah. And that same study also found that children living in urban areas reported experiencing more stressful life events and found them more upsetting compared to kids in suburban areas.
Okay, so environment matters too.
Definitely. What's fascinating here for you is the way that both social factors like gender roles and expectations and environmental factors like where you live can shape your experience of stress.
Right.
The overall picture that emerges is that interpersonal stressors, difficulties in relationships, and the pressure to meet expectations from various sources are pretty universal for students.
That seems consistent.
And while we need more research on gender differences, it seems that girls tend to experience more strain in their relationships and feel the weight of life demands more acutely, or at least report it that way.
Hmm. Okay, so we've taken a good look at where all this stress is coming from. Family, school, peers, societal pressures.
A lot of sources.
Definitely.
Oh,
Now, let's switch gears and talk about how students actually try to deal with these pressures. Coping.
right. The article points out that we actually know less about how young people cope with stress compared to adults.
Which is concerning, isn't it? It might mean we've been underestimating how significant stress is in their lives if we don't fully understand how they handle it.
Absolutely. The article introduces us to several different ways of understanding coping strategies. Folkman and Lazarus's 80 model is really influential.
Okay, what's that?
It talks about two main approaches. Problem-focused coping, which is about actively trying to change the situation or find solutions, tackle the problem head on.
Makes sense. Fix the thing causing the stress.
Right. And emotion-focused coping, which is more about managing your feelings about the stressor, trying to feel better, even if the situation doesn't change.
Okay, like venting to a friend or distracting yourself.
Oh, exactly. Then Moos and Billings in 82 added a third category, appraisal-focused coping.
Appraisal, like how you see it.
Precisely. It involves trying to change how you think about the stressful situation itself, reframing it, looking for the positive.
Got it. And Maddie in 81 offered another perspective, distinguishing between avoidant coping,
Running away from it.
yeah, which involves trying to ignore or escape the stressor, often with a negative outlook, like, this is too hard, I can't deal. And transformational coping, which is about facing the stressor with a more optimistic view and taking deliberate action, seeing it as a challenge to overcome.
That sounds more constructive.
It does. And it's interesting to note, as the article does, that while avoidant coping might offer temporary relief, it can actually lead to more stress in the long run because the problem isn't being addressed.
Right, it just festers. If we connect this to the bigger picture for you, these different ways of categorizing coping help us understand the variety of responses young people might have when they're feeling stressed.
That's not just one thing.
A study by Compass and his colleagues in 88 found that Folkman and Lazarus's categories, problem-focused and emotion-focused, were useful for understanding how middle schoolers cope.
Okay.
However, they also observed a concerning trend. As students got older, moving from 6th to 8th grade, they seemed to rely more on emotion-focused coping and less on problem-focused coping.
Oh, that's not great, is it? Why concerning?
Well, because in their study, emotion-focused coping was linked to more emotional and behavioral problems, while problem-focused coping was associated with fewer problems.
So the coping strategy they increasingly used was actually linked to worse outcomes. That's a really important insight for you listening. It suggests that as kids move through adolescence, they might be leaning more on strategies that don't actually tackle the source of their stress.
Exactly. Interestingly, Compass's study also found that students were more likely to use problem-focused coping when they felt they had some control over the stressor.
Makes sense. If you think you can fix it, you try to fix it.
Right. And they were more likely to use avoidance when they felt powerless to change things, which aligns with what we see in adults, too. Avoidance as a way to manage the distress when the problem feels unsolvable.
What's fascinating here for you to consider is the link between feeling in control and how you try to cope. Compass and his team also found that if there was a mismatch,
Mismatch.
like trying to use problem solving on a situation you can't actually control or avoiding a problem you could potentially do something about, that mismatch was linked to more behavioral issues.
Ah, okay. So using the wrong tool for the job, essentially.
Exactly. This really highlights the importance of helping young people develop realistic perceptions of control and choose coping strategies that actually fit the situation.
That's a key point for intervention. The article also points out that Moriarty and Tu Singh, way back in '76, suggested that coping isn't usually just one type or the other. It's often a mix of both trying to solve the problem and managing your feelings about it, a combination.
Right. You might try to study harder for a test, problem-focused, but also talk to a friend about how nervous you are, emotion-focused.
Precisely. And Patterson and McCubbin's 87 work on how teenagers cope also supported this. They identified 12 different coping patterns that often combine these approaches.
12 patterns. Wow.
Yeah, their patterns did lean a bit more towards strategies focused on managing emotions, but they also mapped onto Maddie's avoidant and transformational categories we mentioned earlier.
Okay.
But what was really interesting, maybe even counterintuitive, was that they found some coping strategies that we might think of as positive,
Like what?
like ventilating feelings, talking about your problems, investing in close friends, and developing social support. These were actually positively related to substance abuse in adolescence.
Wait, what? Seeking support was linked to more substance abuse?
In that study, yes. While on the other hand, strategies like trying to solve family problems, seeking spiritual support, and engaging in demanding activities like sports or hobbies were negatively related, linked to less substance abuse.
That's a really surprising finding. How do they explain the friend support link?
Patterson and McCubbin suggested that perhaps for some teenagers, substance use might actually be a misguided way of trying to fit in with peers or assert their independence, a kind of warped, problem-focused strategy for individuation rather than just an emotional escape.
Huh. So maybe the kind of peer support matters, or what that support involves.
Could be. This raises an important question for you. How can we help young people find healthier ways to achieve those developmental goals of connection and independence when they're feeling stressed?
Yeah, good question. The article also touches on gender differences in coping.
It notes that girls tend to use a wider variety of coping strategies than boys.
Okay, a broader toolkit.
And they're more likely to turn to interpersonal relationships, friends, siblings, parents for support. Donahue and Galata also highlighted this in 83.
Which might reflect different ways boys and girls are socialized, right? Like talk about your problems versus tough it out.
That's the speculation, yeah. Differential socialization.
Okay. So beyond the specific ways students try to cope the strategies, the article also looks at the resources they have available to them.
Right. Both internal strengths and external supports.
Social support comes up as a big one, unsurprisingly. Compass found in 87 that there's generally an inverse relationship strong link between having good social support and experiencing fewer psychological and physical symptoms of stress.
So support helps buffer the negative effects.
Generally, yes. Even though peer support was linked to substance abuse in that one Patterson and McCubbin study, overall, having supportive relationships with family and friends is seen as a major buffer against stress.
The examples the article gives really drive this home. Aptekar's 88 research on Colombian street children.
Street children.
Yeah, who often showed surprisingly good mental health despite incredible hardship. He highlighted the importance of having older mentors, benefactors, and strong bonds with their peers. Chumships, he called them.
Wow. Finding support even in tough circumstances.
That's exactly. And Rutter's 79 work on children from difficult home environments emphasized how having at least one good, stable relationship with a parent could make a huge difference in resilience.
Just one good relationship can be protective.
Seems so. And Garmezy's 83 studies showed how positive foster care placements could help children who had experienced the trauma of war to adjust and heal, providing that crucial supportive environment.
Powerful examples. Social skills are another crucial resource mentioned.
Yeah, Werner's research in 84 and 89 identified things like being able to get positive attention from others in healthy ways, obviously. Having good communication skills, being sensitive to other people's feelings, being able to assert yourself appropriately, and understanding and identifying your own emotions. These were key protective factors.
And these skills even seem to help children of alcoholics avoid serious coping difficulties, as Werner noted in 86.
What's fascinating here for you is how these seemingly basic social abilities can have such a profound impact on a young person's resilience. They help navigate those tricky interpersonal stressors.
Definitely. Having a problem-solving orientation is also really important.
How so?
Elias and his colleagues in 87 found that kids who were better adjusted were good at understanding situations accurately, defining the problem clearly, setting realistic goals, and then coming up with different strategies to reach those goals, thinking things through.
So not just reacting emotionally.
Right. Compass also listed being able to think through interpersonal problems as a key coping resource, and Werner highlighted that resilient children tend to have an active, engaged approach to dealing with life's challenges, not a passive one.
The power of positive thinking also emerges as a significant resource.
You mean like optimism?
Sort of, but more specifically, the absence of negative automatic thoughts. Deal and Williams's '88 study with teenagers found that having a lot of negative thoughts was a stronger predictor of depression than even the number of stressful events they had experienced.
Wow, so your internal monologue really matters.
Hugely. This really underscores how important it is to help young people challenge negative self-talk and learn to see things from a more balanced, objective perspective.
And finally, self-esteem and a sense of control are vital. Compass argued these are fundamental to being resilient.
Yeah, feeling capable and like you have some agency.
Werner's '86 research on children of alcoholics highlighted the importance of a positive self-concept and feeling like you have some control over your life, an internal locus of control.
Mm-hmm.
Weiss's work in '86 and '87 linked feeling incompetent to depression and showed that believing you could succeed in specific areas, self-efficacy, could predict how well someone would do in therapy.
So believing you can handle this specific thing is powerful.
Right. And Penny and her colleagues' '86 study even found that teenagers who smoked tended to have a stronger belief that external factors controlled their lives, more external locus of control, and had lower self-esteem.
Interesting correlation there. The article also briefly touches on some resources that are important even for preschoolers.
Like what? Even before school stress hits hard.
Yeah, things like feeling securely attached to a caregiver, that bond provides a safe base,
Yeah.
and also their natural temperament. Some kids are just naturally more reactive or sensitive than others.
Right.
There's this idea of a spectrum of sensitivity to threats, with those in the middle not overly reactive but not completely unfazed, tending to be more resilient, according to Compass.
Interesting. So not too sensitive, not too insensitive.
Kind of a sweet spot again.
Yeah.
Overall, it's clear that students rely on a mix of coping strategies and resources. Key resources seem to be social support, good social skills, problem-solving abilities, positive thinking or at least less negative thinking, and a strong sense of self-esteem and control.
Okay. That gives us a good handle on coping. Now that we have a better understanding of where stress comes from and how students try to deal with it, let's look at some of the signs, the symptoms that might indicate a student is struggling.
Right. How does this stress actually manifest? Matheny and his colleagues' '90 study, which looked at a lot of data, identified three main areas where stress symptoms tend to show up in elementary school students.
Okay, three main clusters.
Yeah. Disruptive behavior in the classroom, work-study difficulties, and emotional, social, cognitive difficulties.
Those are broad categories, but they cover a lot of ground. Disruptive behavior. That could be acting out, talking back, blaming others.
Exactly. Things that disrupt the learning environment. Work-study difficulties might look like procrastination, a lack of motivation, difficulty concentrating on tasks, not finishing work.
Okay. And emotional, social, cognitive difficulties.
That can involve things like showing signs of sadness, anxiety, or fear, having negative thought patterns like we just discussed, and having trouble making or keeping friends, maybe withdrawing socially.
So stress can really manifest in a variety of ways, behaviorally, academically, emotionally, socially.
We really can. Other researchers have also highlighted specific behavioral and emotional symptoms. Helms and Gable in '90 mentioned things like being overly fearful, shy, or lonely, also talking back to adults and acting aggressively towards others, hitting, fighting.
And Seaman in '78 noted feelings of hopelessness and insecurity.
Yeah. And the article also points to physical symptoms, things like having trouble sleeping, frequent headaches, or stomach aches.
The classic stress symptoms.
Right. And even experiencing panic-like symptoms, flushing, sweating, shallow breathing. Because children are less likely to show the long-term physical effects of chronic stress that adults might, like heart disease.
Hopefully not.
Right. The focus often shifts to how stress can weaken their immune system.
Making them more susceptible to getting sick.
Exactly. More prone to things like colds and the flu. That constant stress response taxes the system.
And the list of emotional and behavioral symptoms goes on. Feeling depressed, being easily agitated or irritable, experiencing excessive fear or worry, having trouble paying attention or concentrating, acting impulsively, regressing to younger behaviors like maybe thumb-sucking or clinginess, and withdrawing from social situations they used to enjoy.
It really underscores how stress can impact almost every aspect of a young person's life. Their mood, their behavior, their learning, their health, their friendships.
Okay. Given how significant stress clearly is in students' lives, the article then addresses the crucial question of how we actually measure these stressors and the ways students cope.
Yeah, how do researchers quantify this stuff? It points out that compared to the tools we have for understanding stress in adults, there was, at least in '93, a real scarcity of good, validated instruments for assessing what's happening with young people.
Right. It's harder to measure with kids, maybe. They might not articulate it the same way.
That's part of the challenge. When it comes to measuring stressors, the life events approach, which started with the work of Holmes and Rahe on adults, has been influential.
The checklist idea, like major events add up.
Kind of. The core idea is that when someone experiences a number of stressful events close together, it drains their ability to adapt, their coping energy. Coddington built on this specifically for kids.
Wow.
He created lists of stressful life events that are specific to different age groups of students. So things like the death or divorce of parents consistently ranked high for younger kids.
Makes sense. Huge disruptions.
Right. And then for older adolescents, things like getting pregnant, getting married, or maybe dealing with a physical deformity were added to the list.
Okay. Age-appropriate stressors.
Exactly. Interestingly, studies using these scales found that older kids tend to experience more of these listed events, but there don't seem to be big differences based on social class or race in terms of the number of events experienced.
International research, like the work of Yamamoto and his colleagues, has even found a surprising amount of agreement across different cultures about what kids find stressful.
Really? Like universal childhood stressors.
Seems like it, suggesting a kind of shared experience of childhood stress, a culture of childhood, as they put it. Things like losing a parent, going blind, being held back in school, wetting yourself in class, and parents fighting were consistently rated as highly stressful across different countries they studied.
That's powerful. Losing a parent, blindness, public humiliation, parental conflict. Those are big.
Definitely. However, a study by Monahan and his team in '79 with British children highlighted that parental behaviors themselves, not just big events like divorce, but maybe ongoing criticism or conflict, were seen as some of the most significant stressors.
So the day-to-day interactions matter hugely, too.
Right. But the life events approach isn't perfect. It has its critics.
Oh, like what?
Well, Cohen and his colleagues in '87 questioned how well just counting up events actually predicts changes in mental health symptoms in teenagers. Their research didn't find a strong link between negative events happening to parents and symptoms in adolescence.
So parental stress didn't directly translate to teen stress in their study.
Not significantly, no, which is different from what Compass and his team found in their '89 study. They did show a connection between stress levels in both teenagers and their fathers and the teenagers' own reported symptoms.
So, conflicting findings there. It seems there's still a lot we're learning about how these different types of stress interact and transmit within a family.
Definitely. To get a more specific picture of school-related stress, researchers also developed tools that focus specifically on the school environment.
Okay, moving beyond just general life events.
Right. The CRISI Coping Resources Inventory for Stress in School-Aged Youth, which also measures coping resources and symptoms, looks at stressors specifically in the school, social, family, and personal areas of a student's life. More targeted.
Yeah.
And the School Situation Survey by Helms and Gable assesses things like how students perceive their teachers' attitudes, their own academic performance, their interactions with peers, and their self-concept as potential sources of stress within the school setting.
So, trying to pinpoint the pressures at school.
Exactly. Overall, the research on measuring stressors tells us that events that threaten a student's sense of safety and security, both physically and emotionally, as well as events that impact their social standing among their peers, are really key.
Security and social esteem. That makes sense.
Things like parental death or serious family problems consistently emerge as highly stressful for young people across different measures.
Right.
And it seems that gender plays a role in how aware students are of stressors and how seriously they rate them, with girls often reporting more awareness and higher ratings of stress, as we discussed earlier.
Okay. When we look at how we measure coping resources, the CRISI instrument we just mentioned also stands out.
Right. It measures stressors and resources.
Yeah. It assesses things like how much support a student feels they get from their family and friends, their overall emotional well-being, their study skills, their ability to control their behavior, and how comfortable they feel in social situations, their social ease.
So it tries to capture those buffers we talked about.
Exactly. And when it comes to actually measuring the coping strategies that students use,
Like problem-focused versus emotion-focused.
right. The Adolescent Coping Orientation for Problem Experiences, or ACOPE, developed by Patterson and McCubbin, is a really valuable tool mentioned in the review.
ACOPE. Okay.
It helped us understand those 12 different coping strategies we talked about earlier: ventilating, seeking support, problem solving, etc. And it's been helpful in seeing how different coping patterns might be linked to things like substance abuse.
And it also revealed those interesting gender differences in coping, right?
It did, with girls reporting that they use relationship-focused coping strategies more often than boys on that measure.
Okay. So we have ways, albeit imperfect ones, to measure stressors, resources, and strategies.
Yes. Which brings us, finally, to the article's shift towards promising ways we might be able to help reduce stress in school-aged youth. Interventions.
Right. What can we actually do about it? It's encouraging to see that research has shown that when we can reduce stress, it can actually lead to improvements in academic performance.
That's a key selling point for schools, potentially. Better well-being leads to better learning.
You do think so.
Yeah.
However, the article also points out that back in '93, specific stress management programs in schools were still not very common. Rubendizer noted that in '87.
Maybe seen as an extra, not essential.
Possibly. The article suggests that the most effective approach is probably one that tries to do two things: create a less stressful environment for students,
Change the context.
and equip students with better skills to handle the stress they do encounter, build resilience.
Makes sense. Attack it from both sides. While Connors in '83 mentioned that changes to the physical school environment, like noise levels, crowding could be helpful, most of the interventions discussed focus more on the second part, giving students better coping tools.
Okay, building student capacity.
Right. Behavioral and cognitive behavioral approaches, which are often used with adults, were recommended by Foreman and O'Malley in '84 as potentially helpful for children dealing with stress related to school achievement and social situations.
Like CBT for kids.
Essentially, these might involve things like stress inoculation training, where you learn to anticipate and mentally prepare for stressors, and learning to challenge negative or irrational thought patterns, that cognitive piece again.
Right, changing the appraisal. Curriculum-based programs that weave in the teaching of social skills and critical thinking are also highlighted.
So integrating it into the school day.
Yeah. Honig, in '86, suggested various things teachers can do to reduce stress in the classroom, like actively building students' self-esteem, acknowledging their feelings instead of dismissing them, preparing them for stressful situations like tests, using humor appropriately, having open classroom discussions about stress and feelings.
Creating a supportive climate.
Exactly. Also using books and art to explore feelings, and importantly, involving parents in these efforts.
The article then gives us some examples of specific intervention programs that were around back then.
Okay, like what?
One called Monitoring and Coping with Stressors by Schultz and Heuschert aimed to teach students how to identify, predict, and manage stressful situations. It focused on developing general adaptive skills like differentiation, fidelity, pacing, kind of complex concepts.
Did it work?
Well, the article doesn't mention any specific research that has looked at how effective this particular program is.
Huh.
Another program by Love in '81, designed for high school students, focused on helping them recognize sources of stress and practice different coping techniques through 6 lesson plans. But again, the article notes a lack of evaluation data on how well it works.
So good ideas, but maybe not rigorously tested at that point.
Seems that way. Relaxation training programs, however, seem to have more evidence behind them.
Like deep breathing, visualization.
Yeah, things like that. Project Relaxation by Matthews and Justice used techniques like progressive muscle relaxation, self-hypnosis or guided imagery, and sometimes optional biofeedback to help students learn to calm their bodies and minds. The idea is that relaxation is incompatible with anxiety.
Right. You can't be relaxed and stressed at the same time.
Exactly. And research by Matthews in '83 found that this kind of training could be effective in improving students' self-concept, discipline, and even academic achievement.
Oh, interesting. Benefits beyond just feeling calmer.
Yeah. And Hybert and Eby's '85 study of a multifaceted relaxation training program using biofeedback scripts tapes also showed significant reductions in anxiety and stress-related symptoms in high school students.
So relaxation techniques seem promising. Another important area mentioned is functional thinking.
Functional thinking, what's that?
It focuses on helping students develop critical thinking skills, improve their decision-making abilities, understand social and emotional situations better, that's social affective understanding, and become better problem solvers. Basically, thinking more effectively about problems and interactions.
Okay, building those cognitive skills.
Right. Programs like those developed by Koppel, Siegel, and Saunders, as well as Elias and Clabby, Botvin and Eng, and Schur and Spivak, which fall under this umbrella, have been linked to enhanced coping skills, improved academic performance, and even a reduced likelihood of engaging in risky behaviors like smoking.
Wow, broad impact from thinking skills.
Seems so. A 6-session program by Jarrett in '87 specifically focused on helping students identify and eliminate cognitive distortions, those negative thought patterns, although the article, again, doesn't provide specific evidence of its effectiveness cited in the review.
Okay. And finally, social skills programs are mentioned.
Right, like the one described by Cartledge and Milburn in '80, focusing on teaching students how to cooperate with others and communicate effectively, directly teaching those interaction skills.
So overall, the interventions that were being explored at the time this article was written back in the early 90s tended to focus on building students' individual coping abilities.
Yeah, through relaxation training, improving their thinking skills, and enhancing their social skills.
Right. Less focus on making large-scale changes to the school environment itself, more on equipping the student.
And while the evidence for how well all these programs worked was somewhat limited in this 1993 review, the goals of these interventions, relaxation, better thinking, social skills, certainly align with what the theories tell us about stress and coping resources.
Definitely. The aims make sense based on the problem.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, the core message for you to take away is this. Stress is not just an adult problem. It's a very real and significant factor in the lives of school-aged children and teenagers.
Absolutely. It has a wide-ranging impact on their learning, their physical and mental health, and their relationships with others.
It's so important for us to remember that childhood and adolescence aren't always the carefree, idyllic times we might imagine them to be.
Not at all. Young people face genuine pressures and challenges from academics, peers, family, society that can create significant stress in their lives, and we need to acknowledge that. It's not minimizing their experience to call it stress.
Exactly. Understanding where these stressors come from, the different ways students try to cope, both the helpful and the not-so-helpful strategies, and the various signs and symptoms of stress is absolutely crucial if we want to provide better support and promote the overall well-being of the young people in our lives, whether we're parents, educators, or just concerned adults.
Yeah, awareness is the first step. This brings us to a final thought for you, our listener. Given all the information we've explored today, drawing from this comprehensive 1993 review,
Right.
what are the broader implications for our society if we continue to underestimate the impact of stress on children and adolescents? If we keep thinking of it as just kids being kids?
That's a heavy question.
It is. And what proactive steps could we be taking in our homes, certainly, but also systemically in our schools and in our communities as a whole to really foster greater resilience and well-being in young people? Going beyond just the individual coping strategies and programs we've discussed, what bigger changes might be needed?
Yeah, what does a truly supportive environment look like on a larger scale?
That's the fall.
It's a really important question to keep in mind as we move forward, something to really mull over.